committee that was endorsed by now Mary Jo Kilroy, who is a very strong female legislator for a number of years. She got redistricted out of her seat. And Social Security, when it comes down to rights, with the DOMA decision, there are over 1,100 federal benefits that are now available to folks. But there's a lot of legal questions. There's a lot of questions about who it will impact, how it will impact them, whether or not it's going to make its way through the legal system in terms of those rights. And so as a result of the DOMA ruling, there actually is going to be the ability to receive Social Security benefits that couples would normally have the ability to have in just those states that have equal protection, equal rights. My understanding, and there's still a lot of legal questions about this, I'm not a lawyer, there's at least 2 lawyers. Are you a lawyer? Okay. So I'm not a lawyer. I talked to quite a few lawyers just to make sure that I have this correct. Civil unions are not recognized by the federal government. It's a different definition. And so it pertains to states and to states' rights, but in terms of Social Security, it will not apply. So in the 13 states that do have equality, that will apply. But in the states, even civil union states, it will not, in terms of the immediate future, at least until there are court challenges that could potentially lead back up to the Supreme Court. In terms of the report that you all have here today, it was a report done in conjunction with the Human Rights Campaign and my organization, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We are a 501c4 nonprofit. We were founded by James Roosevelt, FDR's son, back in the 1980s, when there was a lot of question about the trust fund. And just very briefly, because I'm going to talk about how this impacts marriage equality specifically, but just so everyone knows, Social Security is not going broke. There's a lot of people out there who don't want to pay any taxes, and so they make up lies about programs that people like my grandparents rely on in order to be able to cut it, to be able to finance other spending and the foreign tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. The trust fund has enough money to run to the 2030s with no changes, and what needs to happen in order to make up for the deficit that will happen at that point is to raise the cap. Right now, people only pay for their first $113,700 in income, which I doubt very many people in this room make that much. I certainly don't. Nobody in my family does. And after that, they pay nothing. Medicare used to be that way. It changed to apply to all of income. That needs to happen with Social Security. Even if it's not to take out the cap completely, you at least raise it to the point where it makes up for the potential fiscal shortfall. So in terms of this report, Social Security was actually an idea by a woman, Frances Perkins. She was labor secretary under FDR, worked very, very hard to get it passed, and thankfully actually found out that it was going to be found constitutional at a dinner party when she talked to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time. So in terms of why it's important, over half of America's seniors would be in poverty if it weren't for Social Security. Only about 10% of seniors are actually in poverty under the federal guidelines as a result of the program being so effective. Right now, there are corporations that offer equal protections, offer domestic partner coverage. They offer health insurance, retirement package, other legal rights. Social Security hasn't kept up with that. Under the statute, based upon what defines a couple, right now, the way it's defined, it would exclude same-sex partners. That can be changed in a number of ways. One way is by changing the law. Another way is by rewriting the rules administratively. There are questions about whether or not how you can do that, but that's certainly something that we would encourage. In terms of families, so you have couples, but you also have the children of the couples. Right now, same-sex couples raise about 250,000 children every single year, and it's a huge amount of people who would be impacted not just by survivors' benefits, but also disabled children. Well, if the parent who's not the biological parent dies, they will not be entitled to the same rights that exist. And about 4.4 million children receive benefits each year because of parents, because of what parents worked. And just as a reminder, these are earned benefits. This is money that people paid into for a long time, and they're simply receiving their money back. So in terms of children, that same 4.4 million children receive about $2.4 billion a month in benefits. Many of these children would be homeless, wouldn't get medical treatment, wouldn't have a secure environment. And actually, I met a woman, Sarah Carter. She actually spoke publicly, so I feel comfortable using her name. Her husband died in Iraq, and her children receive survivor's benefits as a result of that. But they are one bad accident away from being homeless. She actually said to me, you know, if it wasn't for Social Security, I would have committed suicide. Because if she was so desperate, she was so on the edge. And there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across this country where Social Security is that lifeline for them, not just for them, but also for their kids. In terms of Social Security benefits, you can actually receive survivor's benefits up till the point you're 18. And actually, I'm distantly related to Paul Ryan. I found this out at a funeral, because everyone was so excited that Paul had been picked for vice president. I was like, why are you so excited? And they said, oh yeah, he's my cousin. I actually didn't know that until about a year ago. So he received survivor's benefits. His father died when he was young. And so it's kind of ironic that one of the people who most benefited from some of these programs is also the key architect to undo them. In terms of the death of a parent, you got $785 a month that children can receive. That's the average. And it's about half of that if the parent becomes disabled. We're not talking about a lot of money here. I mean, this is basic sustenance and basic safety net. This is not going to be something that people get rich off of. Because of lack of recognition, those children could lose up to $9,400 a year in benefits. That could be devastating. That could push people into poverty. Imagine it this way. If you're a couple and not married under the state law, one person brings a child into the relationship. Maybe they just had the child, maybe they adopted, whatever the case might be. You're together for 5 years. The child is still fairly young, and suddenly the biological parent dies. There's no recourse. And so that child is, in some instances, condemned to poverty as a result of that. And there's nothing they can do about it until the law is changed. The average loss of this will be $22,000 a year, okay? This is real money. And imagine a parent who just lost their spouse, many of times which maybe they made a higher income. Being able to make up for that shortfall is not easy. In terms of spouses, according to recent census data, there's about 500,000 married couples that aren't recognized under current law in the country. And the Social Security system originally did not include many of the benefits you have today. It was just purely retirement. Eventually they added disability, they added the survivor's benefits, etc. And the reason being is that the thought was better to help somebody get up on their feet after a tragedy than to allow them to fall into poverty. Then they get into programs like Medicaid and SNAP and all that. And if you need that, that's fine. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that. But Social Security helps to preempt that, helps to keep people in the middle class, helps to keep people stable. And so a surviving spouse is eligible to receive benefits on the spouse in terms of disability and also in terms of death benefits. And on average, if you are married and if you're recognized, it can be as much as $1,100 in addition of benefits. And without that, you receive it according to your income. So say, for example, you have a couple, one of whom makes a lot more, one of whom makes a lot less. And if the person who makes less, if they lose somebody, or that somebody becomes disabled, or whatever the case might be, normally, if you're married, you can actually choose which income to base it upon. You can base it upon the higher income earner or the lower income earner. But because of the way the law is, you won't be able to do that because your marriage isn't recognized. In terms of discrimination, it even follows you into death. I know this is I feel very moribund right now talking all these bad things. But it's horrible what's happening. Because you got disabled children. Maybe they're born with cerebral palsy or whatever the case might be. Normally, you would be able to receive benefit from the time they're a child through adulthood. But because if you have a marriage that's not recognized, the benefits could be less as a result of that, or in some cases you could not get them at all. The death benefit right now, the average person gets $255 once a spouse dies. Now, I know funerals cost a lot more than that, but that is something that even in death, you're discriminated against because of who you married and who you love. In terms of what we think should happen, thankfully with the DOMA decision, that sort of moved the ball forward on that issue, although there's a lot of questions about the legalities with that in terms of how long it'll take, whether in the administration, which we are working very hard to encourage them to do whatever they can within the law to improve the definitions of what's considered a marriage or a spouse. We think that we should be able to expand spousal benefits. There's actually a law, the Respect for Marriage Act, which did include a repeal of DOMA in it. I'm sure it's probably been removed. Yeah, so we believe that should pass, because that will change the statutes to line up with what should be done. That said, this current Congress, especially the House, it's going to be very difficult to convince them this is the right thing to do. So one of two things needs to happen. Either people need to really apply a lot of pressure on key members of Congress to get this done, or there needs to be a different makeup of Congress in the next election. So thank you very much, and if anybody has any questions, I can answer them after.